I think the country may seem very polarized, but I truly believe the most polarized place in our country is our Senate. I think Americans are sick and tired of seeing this carnage in our schools and communities on a daily basis. And ultimately, no matter, the average person on the left or right, regardless of whether or not they entirely agree with me, we can all agree we need action to save our kids, because just adding more good guys with guns has only done one thing, and sell more guns. They failed in Parkland, they failed in Texas, and they're going to fail again in the future, because we can't just keep letting young men that get legal access to AR-15s and get on campus. The shooter at my high school, he was not a criminal. He was a criminal, but he was not a mastermind. He didn't have deep connections to the black market. He was a 19-year-old that was able to legally access an AR-15. The shooter in Texas was 18 and was able to do the same, and so is the shooter in Buffalo. And they weren't mentally ill. They were hateful individuals who got a weapon, in my opinion, of mass destruction that shouldn't be out there in the first place, and nearly as easy as it is right now. So at minimum, let's try to raise the age to 21. And ultimately, this is a call to action to all Americans. I want you to look at your kids if you're a parent at home right now. I want you to look at your kids, your best friend if you don't have kids. That person could be next, and that's why we need you in this fight. And if you want to join us, text NEXT to 954-954. That's NEXT to 954-954. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Well, let me ask, I would reframe it as, why are we only asking this when it's predominantly white mass shooters and we only talk about mental health in that context? Well, when it's not, we call them a terrorist, or we call them a criminal, or we call them something else, right? Let's realize that radicalization and becoming a white supremacist is not a mental illness. It is a systemic problem in our country that it's going to take all Americans to address the hatred that is out there. Because we can't just address how somebody gets these guns. We got to address why do they pick them up in the first place, and address the fact that mental health does have a role to play in gun violence, but it's in addressing the 2/3 of gun deaths that are suicides, that are predominantly men, that are not talked about. And it's also about addressing the daily trauma that black and brown communities especially experience disproportionately in this country from gun violence. There are kids that are traumatized outside of their schools that do need mental health support. So we do need to fund mental health more. I'm just saying, let's not use it as a scapegoat and stigmatize mental health so that a kid goes to their teacher and says, I'm depressed, and then gets put on a list of possible school shooters when they're way more at risk themselves than others.